Hello and welcome aboard the Gallant Says podcast, Monday, November 27th of 2023. It's live at youtube.com/Paul Gallant, twitch.tv/Gallant Says, on X, and also on Facebook, facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports. Also available after the fact wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. If you ever have a question, shoot me an email at gallantsays@gmail.com. On tonight's show, Houston, we have a problem. I'm so sorry I said that, but you deserved to hear those 5 annoying as shit words that you constantly hear from anybody talking about bad things that happen to Houston sports. I'm also going to put on my Big J hat because journalism is dying. But we begin talking about the last episode of the Gallant Says podcast. You might have watched it last night. You can always check out the show on Sundays right after the Texans finish up. It's generally when I get back from NRG Stadium. I tweeted out a video from my show. Not that it mattered, but CJ Stroud was better than Trevor Lawrence on Sunday. This is maybe a different conversation if the Jags didn't have those drops. Still, Lawrence had his trademark inaccurate moments and was bailed out by the Zebras. I'm not sure if I've quite been ratioed by Jags fans. I do appreciate their commentary. I do appreciate that they care. Looking at it right now, it's got 287 likes, but 97 retweets. I'm assuming most of those are quote tweets. 213 responses. Now, I'm not anymore, at least, going to go through those replies because most football fans compared to me are peasants. I grew up a Patriots fan. I just have higher standards than you. You might think I'm trolling and being sarcastic here. No, I'm being serious with this moment right now. And yeah, the Patriots are fucking terrible right now. They are. But when you grow up in Massachusetts and you watch the greatest run of all time, whether it's Brady who did it all or Belichick who did it all, you just have different standards. With 11 games of CJ Stroud, you could easily accuse me of being a homer. But what we have seen from Stroud to this point this year, and in particular on Sunday, at the very least, if you're not going to say he's an MVP candidate or one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the league, which I think that latter part is debatable, I think you have to say he is clearly a more talented quarterback than Trevor Lawrence. That is not to say Trevor Lawrence stinks. I think Trevor Lawrence is good. I also think that Trevor Lawrence is a victim of his own hype. He was billed as a once-in-a-generation prospect, the best quarterback since Andrew Luck. Is he that? I think you could also argue that Andrew Luck, who was a very good to great quarterback in his career, maybe didn't quite deliver on the hype that I guess was the best since Peyton Manning before him. Obviously, there's an unfair standard when it comes to quarterbacks. You have to win Super Bowls. But I think after watching yesterday's game, there are only 2 reasons that you would disagree with me when I say, again, CJ Stroud is clearly a more talented quarterback than Trevor Lawrence. And also, CJ Stroud was better than Trevor Lawrence on Sunday. Because I still feel that way. The reason I say that is this. Stroud is capable of doing more. And look, there are some things that I think Trevor Lawrence is very good at. I think he's got good mobility. I think he's got a pretty good arm. I think he can make some difficult throws. I'm not saying he's bad. I just think Stroud's special. And I'm not sure Lawrence is there. If you watched D'Amico Ryan's press conference today, you would have seen that after seeing the film, he thought that CJ Stroud could have gone through his progressions a little bit more, that he missed some open receivers out there. And that certainly happened. I even heard Andre Ware talking about it a couple of times on the radio broadcast. But he extends plays on a level that Trevor Lawrence and very few other quarterbacks can. We're talking prime Russell Wilson when he first came into the league. We're talking Patrick Mahomes. He is really good at extending plays, but knowing that he can really wait until the absolute last second to get rid of that football, and something special is going to happen. And I would say on paper going into the year, if you were to compare the Jaguars receiving core with Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, you would clearly take that receiving core, Evan Ingram, over what the Texans have. But Stroud's made a lot out of a little. No. No offense to Nico Collins. And definitely no offense to Tank Dell, who has been a fantastic revelation as the 69th overall pick in this year's draft class. But Texans receiving core, on paper, going into the year, we would all agree the Jaguars had more to work with. I think we would say going into the year that maybe the Texans have a better offensive line, but the Jaguars have a pretty good offensive line as well. And Stroud was making, I thought, a lot happen in spite of what was around him. It was a bad day for the Texans offensive line on Sunday, while for the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence was only pressured twice. And yeah, I think after yesterday's game, you could maybe make the argument that the Jaguars receiving core is worse than the Texans because of the 5 drops that the Jaguars had. But I think there's only 2 reasons that you would argue that Trevor Lawrence is more talented than CJ Stroud and that he was better than CJ Stroud. 1, you're a Jaguars fan and you're biased. And again, we've all been there. But 2, you didn't actually watch and you think that passing yards are the end-all be-all. So let's go through those 2 arguments. Let's start with number 2. Maybe you're a fantasy football obsessor who furiously masturbates over passing yards. I think yards are generally overrated. They're misleading. They can come during garbage time. They can come as a result of big plays made in the open field or just complete coverage breakdowns. And I would say in particular with receiving yards, yards after the catch, something you want to set your receivers up for, it's very difficult to find metrics that actually measure them. There's a couple of websites that measure them from a team basis, but they only do it for the whole year. And I had to go and do a little bit of digging on my own. And by digging, I mean watch the tape and do math. But there was a lot of yards after the catch for Trevor Lawrence in his 364-yard passing performance on Sunday. By my count, at least 143 of those yards came after the catch, if not more. So over a third. Doesn't mean he had a bad day. I'm not saying Lawrence had a bad day. But he had a 42-yard, I believe, screen. All 42 of those were after the catch. Throw to the tight end in the right flat. 39 yards after the catch on a 42-yard catch. Beautiful play to Calvin Ridley right before halftime. It was a good throw. Now, Ridley toasted Tavier Thomas by a couple of yards. He had 29 yards after the catch there. There was that crazy play that Lawrence went to his right, threw it back to his left, a la Frank Wycheck in the Music City Miracle. 12 yards on that one. And then you had that 45-yard throw to Calvin Ridley where Steven Nelson was in coverage. Again, wide open. Good throw by Lawrence. 21 yards after the catch. You want to set your receivers up for yards after the catch. But if you're using yards as a crux for your argument that Trevor Lawrence was better than CJ Stroud yesterday, that's a pretty heavy factor there. Especially when you consider there was no pressure. And the Texans secondary had a bad day at the office. But maybe you want to make a counter argument. Jaguars receivers, as I said before, dropped 5 passes, including one that was a touchdown pass. That was right in his hands. Should have caught it. So add that one in, And okay, maybe we're talking close to 400 passing yards for Lawrence over the course of the day. Those throws down the field to Ridley were great too. They were very open, but they were great throws. But Lawrence had some moments where he struggled. And I get that you could argue CJ Stroud struggled to go through his progressions based off of what you heard from the coach. But I didn't remember any moments where CJ Stroud, who's had some turnover issues of late, was close to turning the football over other than one pass over the middle of the field that bounced up in the air, was a little bit high, and was nearly intercepted off a deflection. Lawrence, meanwhile, had a couple. He threw that one interception to Derek Stingley. Yeah, there was a hold on that play. Probably should have been called. It wasn't. But he almost threw another interception to Derek Stingley. And there was another play that Stroud was bailed out on where Houston Carson, the Texans' backup safety, was called for pass interference. The All-22, at least last I checked, which is 8 o'clock right now on Monday, November 27th, it wasn't out yet. They never showed a replay of that pass interference, but Houston Carson could have easily intercepted that ball. I mean, it went right to him, and it seemed like that receiver that he had been interfering with or holding still was able to get a step on him. But Lawrence couldn't make it happen in that spot in the red zone. And it wasn't the only situation where Lawrence had that happen. The second red zone possession that Trevor Lawrence had, you can argue whether or not those calls against the Texas defensive backs were merited or not. All I'm going to say is those calls bailed out poor throws by Lawrence. He made one read before the Jaguars got inside the 5-yard line on that pick play, that rub play where Ingram runs a wheel route to the right. And Tavier Thomas was called for a hold there. I feel like with the pick play that was called there, that maybe that shouldn't have been called pass interference. I thought it was, back and forth. But Thomas fought through that pick, and I thought Lawrence didn't throw a good ball there. It was overthrown, and I think had he thrown that football a little bit closer to the center of the field, I feel like Ingram might have caught that ball. Okay, but that's perhaps a reach by my part. Second down, in that same red zone possession, Evan Ingram's wide open over the middle of the end zone. Lawrence airmails it. He does that a couple of times a game. Every now and then, the ball just goes high on him. I don't know why it does, but it does. Doesn't have the best footwork from time to time. There was that third down throw to the right sideline to Christian Kirk. It was uncatchable, but they called a flag there. And on 2nd and goal, there was a throw to the right on a play fake that Lawrence made, and he was so late. He was like about almost a half second to a second late. Farrell toasted Houston Carson, and he threw it late. That should have been a touchdown. So look, you can nitpick any quarterback, and I'm sure that there's some things that you could nitpick with CJ Stroud over the course of this game, but I don't remember CJ Stroud ever coming close to throwing 4 interceptions in a game. I know he did have the 3 interception game against the, it feels so long ago, against the Cardinals, but one of those interceptions was off of a drop. Okay, fine, but 4 interceptions in one quarter, that's something that Lawrence did in his first ever playoff game, and honestly, had the Chargers not collapsed, we're talking about maybe the Jaguars are a team with a lot of pressure on their shoulders going into these playoffs this year. They still seem to be in a honeymoon phase, and okay, they're 8-3. They're in first place in the AFC South. They've probably won the division at this point in time, but Lawrence has been billed to us as the greatest quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. And in reality, I think he's a lot like Justin Herbert in that he's a good player in a situation that no one gives a shit about. A better situation, that's for sure, but criticism is due. I think we should all admit he's good, but I don't think he's special or transcendent on the level that people want to make him do. So let's read some comments here. John Cook says Paul is a demigod. I did have a very misleading headline on the YouTube channel here. Nick says the refs lost us the game. We'll talk about the refs in a little bit. Cyril Yorn says Stroud is the best quarterback in the AFC South. No one said Trevor Lawrence stinks. Yep. Stroud has destroyed expectations and brought us Texans fans so much happiness. Yorns continues saying our secondary and coverage linebacker kind of punished us in this game. Clarence Austin Jr. says, Stroud better how? A rookie that hasn't really done anything? Well, what has Lawrence done? It's been 3 years. What has Lawrence done? Tell me. I'm waiting. Other than throw 4 interceptions in the first quarter of a playoff game. I mean, what's the marquee win for Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars this year? I'll wait. Jacob Iyer says, Paul, Jags fans are always triggered because they know Shad Khan is moving the team to London. Ooh. Well, I don't think there's much criticism of the Jaguars. I think that they're one of those organizations that's in a small market that people sort of look the other way on. I think you could say the same thing about the Chargers. Clarence Austin says, dude, you're doing too much. You biased also, sir. You loving a rookie quarterback that hasn't done anything yet at all after 11 games. Stroud is all world. I think if you can't see the talent discrepancy between Stroud and Lawrence, that you don't know much about football. And again, I'll say this as a Patriots fan, I know more. I mean, I've seen it all. I followed Tom Brady growing up. It's early, sure, but we live in the now. Please tell me why Lawrence is better than Stroud. If you watch Stroud, his elusiveness is better. His accuracy is better. He makes less mistakes. He turns the football over less. Lawrence fumbles a fuck ton. Again, I'll wait. Jacob Ayers. Lawrence was literally being compared to Tom Brady on draft day and hasn't played like that. All the praise he was getting on draft night. Exactly. Mick Martinez. Why all radio types scared to say anything against the refs? Just be honest. The game was rigged. Vegas never loses. Why would they rig the game for Jacksonville? They're rigging it for the Chiefs or the Eagles or something like that. I would get it. No one's going to rig a fucking game for Jacksonville. The refs sucked completely in that game. I talked about it. It's not the reason that the Texans lost that game. 2 quarterback pressures. Cam Robinson got hurt. Come on. You're better than that. The secondary stunk. They're not quite there yet. This is a honeymoon season. I was joking around on today's show. Like, it's casual fun following the Houston Texans right now. It's nothing serious. You're not taking anybody home to mom. Anything that you've gotten thus far this year is amazing. You're taking it. We'll talk about the refs a little bit later. Cruz says CJ Stroud, the quarterback who has more passing yards, more touchdowns, less interceptions, better QBR, rookie head coach, rookie OC, less established that the Jaguars is definitely way better than Trevor. Andrew, thank you. Do I even need to say anything more? Do I need to say anything more? Okay, so we're just going back and forth here. Jacob Iyer says, Paul, you need to try corn when you go on rants as a Patriots fan. That is a great point. I'm going to get a prop. I got lots of props. See that closet right behind me? It's like all costumes. All costumes. Mick Martinez says there was too much money on the Texans. That was why they might have rigged it. Yeah, I'm not going to go so far as to call it rigged. I'm not. Okay? I want to talk about the Jaguars really quickly a little bit more. I think that Texans fans should have taken the Jaguars a little bit more seriously going into this game, given the way that things have gone this year. Barely beat the Cardinals, lost to the Panthers, lost to the Falcons. There's been some bad games this year. But I think the clock is ticking for the Jaguars, and I think it's pretty pathetic. And you could argue I'm coping or I'm big mad or something like that. I think it's pathetic to brag about AFC South supremacy when the Texans are babies, like they're essentially infants. And you are now, for the second year in a row, the top dog in the AFC South. Like that one guy, what's his name? Like Central Florida Jaguars or something like that, who's like, yeah, Lawrence is better than Stroud, and the Jaguars run the AFC South. And maybe people should have been a little more respectful of the Jaguars again, but don't brag about AFC South supremacy. Like, it's like bragging about having the most human rights in the Middle East. Look at us! We don't behead people for shoplifting. I think some people would argue that we don't go quite as far as beheading, but maybe we, I don't know, punish people that steal less than $1,000 worth of stuff. But that's neither here nor there. This year, the reason that I look at the Jaguars with a bit of a side eye, but I have a healthy amount of respect. I think Doug Peterson's done a really good job taking over for Urban Meyer. They've played in 3 big games thus far. Sunday against the Texans, they won. The Buffalo Bills, a team that's on the outside looking in. But hey, Trevor Lawrence, 25 of 37 for 315 yards and a touchdown. He got sacked 5 times, but the Jaguars ran for nearly 200 yards. But they also lost 17-9 to Kansas City, where Trevor Lawrence was barely a 50% passer, 22 of 41 for 216 yards. Other than that, if you take a look at the Jaguars' schedule and who they've played, they really haven't played anybody. And yeah, you are who your schedule is, but again, the Jaguars have not really played anybody to this point. Obviously, there's lots of season left, and they have an opportunity against the Baltimore Ravens in a couple of weeks to prove themselves a little bit more. And that one's actually going to be in prime time for a change. That's something that we don't typically see the Jaguars in. But their wins over this stretch of 7 wins in 8 games. Atlanta, Indy, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, Houston with a 34-3 loss to the 49ers also along the way. A game where Trevor Lawrence statistically struggled. I didn't watch it, but Lawrence was 17 of 29 for 185 yards, 2 interceptions, sacked 5 times along the game, and I'm just going to assume that he lost a fumble. Look at that. He did. So the Jaguars are probably the 4th best team in the AFC. Behind the Chiefs, behind the Ravens, behind the Dolphins. I would say if you're a Jaguars fan, let's have higher aspirations than being the best team in the AFC South. But I don't know. I can only speak for myself. Some of us have standards. Also, where is Lawrence among AFC quarterbacks? The AFC has a lot of good quarterbacks. Where is he? 5th? 6th? Mahomes is 1. Healthy Joe Burrow is 2. Okay, Joe Burrow's out for the year. Let's take him out. Josh Allen, with the season he's having, is the 2nd best quarterback in the AFC to this point. I know. Ooh, Paul, you should be saying CJ Stroud there. Well, so these people's arguments, what has CJ Stroud done? We've seen Josh Allen in big moments have big games. He's also struggled recently in some big games too. 3, this is where it starts to get into the what have they done in a big moment spot. But Tua, statistically, the last couple of years when he's been healthy has been awesome. So I'm going to put 2 at 3. I'll put Stroud at 4. And this is where you could potentially put in Lawrence. 4th, 5th, 6th. Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Lawrence, healthy Aaron Rodgers. Like, that's where he is. And there's nothing wrong with that. Jaguars fans shouldn't get so upset about the idea, though, that Stroud is already someone who looks more talented than Trevor Lawrence, a guy who was billed to us as, like, the greatest thing since sliced bread. Really quick last couple of thoughts. I don't know how many people saw that Frank Reich got canned in Carolina, as did Josh McCown. Remember when Josh McCown, the Texans almost hired him, then pivoted last second to Lovie Smith? Man, that feels so long ago. Oh, man, what a miserable time to be a fan of that team. They pivoted to Lovie Smith. I saw a tweet. This is from Scott Barrett. And I'm going to transfer in a second so that you guys can actually oh, man, I don't know how to do this. There we go. So you can actually see the tweet. But Josh McCown's mom is Robin McCown, and she tweeted this. Check that. She liked this tweet from 1912 Fantasy. You can sort of see it at the very bottom. Watch the Josh McCown UD QB series, then watch the Panthers QB search videos on their YouTube. I always got the feeling the coaches wanted Stroud and the owners wanted Young. I get that feeling as well. And nothing against Bryce Young, but it's been a struggle, and the Panthers are 1-10, and that's why he's out of a job. Imagine Cal McNair being the better owner than David Tepper. How many people would have said Cal McNair was better than any owners in the NFL? A lot of you would have said, no, he's the worst owner in the NFL with the Cal McNair stuff. Or excuse me, with the Jack Easterby stuff. I got to say, I think that's a decent ownership group. A lot of that has to do with Hannah McNair taking more ownership, but I think that they've come a long way in just a little bit of time, and they deserve credit for it, even if you're not maybe buying all the way back in. Jacob Byers comments, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Reich is the scapegoat. David Tepper is the problem with that team. Oh, look at that. It's our guy, Steve Beckholt. Steve, Houston Texans fan of the year, right? Congrats, buddy. Good to see Steve. Steve is the ultimate Texan. So glad we didn't get Josh McCown. Aren't we all? Goodness gracious. Okay, I'm going to do something really quickly. I know that we all hate to hear this, but Houston, we have a problem. I hate it when this happens, and I talked about it on the show yesterday. This city, from a sports perspective, for whatever reason, it loves to blame the referees. Now, maybe this is a thing across all sports cities, but I like to think that the James Harden era of Houston Rockets basketball, with Bill Worrell and Matt Bullard on the call on TV, has made it worse. And obviously, advanced replay and ability to zoom in has made us all feel like we are better than the referees out on the field. I think it's a difficult job. Doesn't mean that they should be completely scot-free when it comes to criticism, immune from it. But I think that we as a city are generally worse when it comes to blaming refs. I think Rockets fans were insufferable over the last decade, constantly looking for calls with that charlatan James Harden and his bullshit parlor tricks, flopping around trying to get fouls, a man playing with no honor. Forget the way he left. Hated the way that he played. I hated watching that team. Even with Harden and that team winning, I didn't like the way that they were doing it. It wasn't basketball to me. Call me a football head, a football guy who doesn't know that much about basketball. Whatever. I'd rather watch some team absolutely hack the bejesus out of the other team. Like they're the Memphis Grizzlies back in the day. But bring it back. Remember when Daryl Morey had that report sent in after the Western Conference Finals between the Rockets and Warriors in 2018? He had that report sent. And, it was basically a document outlining all the times that the referees missed calls that should have gone in the Rockets' favor while they were missing 27 threes in a row. Okay, maybe some of those calls should have been called. I don't know. But I didn't like hearing this today at D'Amico Ryan's press conference. Texans coach D'Amico Ryan said Monday he will submit some calls from Sunday's 24-21 loss to the Jaguars to the NFL for review. We'll let the league handle that from that perspective, Ryan said about questionable calls from the game. Doesn't want to get fined. When he was asked what calls he would submit, Ryan said, we'll talk to the league about that. I'm just saying it's never a good look to stay at it. And I agree there were bad calls in the game. You could argue there were more bad calls against the Texans than there were against the Jaguars. There were some bad calls against the Jaguars, though. That Derek Stingley interception, Jalen Petrie was clearly holding. There was another play where Tavier Thomas on a third down got away with a hold, too. Obviously, there were the two plays to Tank Dell. You could argue that the first one on the left sideline was clearly a catch, especially once we got to see camera angles of it after the fact that CBS didn't have access to, but it felt like the replays that they showed, he made the catch. I guess that Nico Collins was also in motion, though, on that other play deep down the middle of the field that got called back due to an illegal motion based off of people watching the film after the fact. I don't know if the All-22 is out. I went to NFL Plus. I didn't see it for the Texans and Jaguars game. It was available for some of the other games. Maybe that has changed in the time since. But I just hate that we have a ref problem here. The reason I hate blaming the refs, to go back to your point, Mick Martinez on Facebook.com/PaulGallantSports, it's that I feel like we just do it all the time. And after a while, it just sounds like butthurt whining. You know? Anyway. The Houston Oilers says, Paul, you got a lil wiener. It's the Irish curse. That's what they say. Twitch.tv/Gallant says if you want to jump in as well. Steve says that were some BS calls. Some of those calls were BS. I don't think it's the reason the Texans lost, though. I think their lack of a pass rush and their coverage was the biggest reason. What else do we have before we hit the road? Oh, you know what? I'm going to put on my Big J hat for just a little bit here, okay? I did promise I was going to be a journalist. Guys, I'm just bummed out by the state of journalism these days, and specifically sports media. You know, I want to have a job. I want to feed my cat. Did you see my cute little kitty cat on X? I mean, she's making viral Christmas content for me. She's just been super duper cute since I got back from my little trip to Florida for Thanksgiving. But I want to have a job in media in some way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, artificial intelligence is coming to replace us all. I don't know how many people saw this story, but Sports Illustrated, the magazine of which I have many covers on the wall. I got the Houston Astros 2017 champions article. I got an article of or a cover with J.J. Watt, 99 Problems. I got a Legion of Boom, an old Gary Payton one, too, from my time in Seattle. I mean, I used to love reading Sports Illustrated, but Sports Illustrated has changed, as has just online written media over the years. Sports Illustrated has come under fire for publishing stories written by artificial intelligence, and they've attributed those stories to writers that don't exist. Profiles for fake authors used AI-generated headshots and made-up bios. There's an example of this, and I'm going to show you online. It's of a guy named Drew Ortiz. Let's take a look here. You can watch along. You should watch the show. You get to see my face and all the gesticulations I make along the way. But here's a fake writer by the name of Drew Ortiz. It's an AI-generated photo of a neutral, white, young adult male with short brown hair and blue eyes. And they even wrote a little profile for him. Drew likes to say that he grew up in the wild, which is partially true. He grew up in a farmhouse, surrounded by woods, fields, and a creek. Drew has spent much of his life outdoors and is excited to guide you through his never-ending list of the best products to keep you from falling to the perils of nature. I thought he was a sports writer. Nowadays, there is rarely a weekend goes by where Drew isn't out camping, hiking, or just back on his parents' farm. I mean, talk about like checking all the cliche boxes for bullshit backstory. But listen, guys, that's Drew Ortiz, a fake Sports Illustrated writer. But these guys, these artificial intelligence writers, are writing all sorts of articles these days online. And I've thought about getting back into writing, maybe with a Substack or a Patreon or something like that. I'd actually have to put in the effort and not be lazy and procrastinate all the time, which is my biggest problem. But I've thought about getting back into writing. But what's the fucking point if I'm competing with fucking robots? What am I supposed to do here? And especially when I take a look at some of the other people that are stuck writing articles online. I saw this post online at KHOU, and I just feel bad for whoever had to write it. Robots, maybe you should take over. Just kill us all right now. The internet's favorite food critic is now scouting for the best dining spots here in the Houston area. This weekend, Keith Lee posted a TikTok video announcing his video and asked for recommendations. I'm so jealous of the food TikTokers. Lee's reviews have already gained millions of views online. His videos are known to create massive booms for local restaurants, with lines usually going down the street just one day after a positive review. Okay, so he's helping the community out. That's cool, but you're writing a blog about a fucking TikToker, a TikToker who is saying, hey, please help me do my job of creating content. Lee, a former MMA fighter who is now a food critic, has more than 15 million followers on TikTok. He has traveled major cities around the country, reviewing food and posting those reviews on TikTok. He typically doesn't go into the restaurants to stay anonymous. Then he gives honest reviews as he eats. According to the New York Times, he started posting to TikTok to help with his anxiety of public speaking. Oh, bullshit that he's got anxiety of public speaking. You're posting on TikTok? Get the fuck out of here. That helps with your anxiety posting on TikTok? Definitely would not. I don't even read the comments that I get on TikTok. It's generally stuff like, oh, look at this angry person. Why are you so mad? Why are your eyebrows bigger than your beard? Are you a virgin? Are you a gay virgin? I can't even answer any of those questions. What's the point of answering any of those questions? There's no winning. The internet's merciless. Oh, you're gonna post on fucking TikTok to deal with your anxiety? Oh, okay. He started posting restaurant reviews in 2021. The Times also reports the food he gets is takeout and has a family member pick it up, so he doesn't get the food critic treatment. All right, well, good for him. But that's the state of journalism in 2023. But there was a big story, or maybe it's just a big headline. And I can't believe it got lost in the shuffle, because this seems to be big news. And I don't want to get in trouble here. I just saw the headline, and me being a dumb idiot for a moment, I thought to myself, wait a second. I think that we've come up with some sort of incredible medical cure. So I'm just going to show the headline that I believe was on KHOU's website that I saw earlier today. Governor Greg Abbott jumps out of a plane with a 106-year-old World War II vet. I'm just going to read the first part out. Governor Greg Abbott jumps out of plane. Now, for those who don't know, Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, has been paralyzed since 1984 and moves around in a wheelchair. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Politics aside, I know some people are like, probably in the comments right now. He jumped. So I read the story, and this is misleading headline. And maybe the artificial intelligence isn't going to take all of our jobs. So pretty awesome that he jumped out with an 106-year-old World War II veteran. There's a picture of this World War II vet. He looks like he's completely fucking with it, like more with it than me. They're handing, but they're shaking hands, but they were in tandem parachutes. I'm not going to lie. After I realized, okay, well, he hasn't been cured, I did think to myself for a second, did someone throw him out? Because then you technically would be jumping. I just thought that. Sorry, I'm a child at heart. But I saw that headline, and I thought for a second that we were burying the lead. But that's journalism in 2023, folks. Guys, I appreciate you so much for stopping by. Bob's4, youtube.com/Paul Gallant says, this Monday Night Football game is exhilarating. I fucking doubt it. What is it, Bears? Vikings? Fuck that. I ain't watching. I'm about to go to the gym. Anyway, guys, I appreciate y'all for joining me as always. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe on YouTube. You can do the same thing on Twitch. You can do it on Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports if you're into that. Or on X @Gallant Says. You can also get this in audio form, Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. And if you ever have a question, gallantsays@gmail.com. So long, farewell, and have yourselves a wonderful Monday night. We'll be back at it on Thursday night. Until then.